The heavy steel doors of operating room slammed shut with a metallic crash, leaving senior trauma nurse Clara Jenkins standing alone in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway. Moments earlier, she had been ordered to stand down by Georgetown University Hospital's most powerful surgeon. At the time, she obeyed. Later, the elevators would open, and armed military generals would step out demanding only one person: her. Rain hammered against the reinforced glass windows of Georgetown University's Level 1 Trauma Center. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of graveyard shift where silence usually ruled the halls. Most of the hospital was asleep except for the steady hum of ventilation systems and the occasional distant siren echoing through Washington, D.C. Clara Jenkins stood behind the nurse's station updating patient charts with her usual precision. At 34 years old, Clara was known throughout the hospital for three things: competence, calmness, and emotional distance. She never panicked. She never raised her voice. When alarms screamed and chaos erupted, Clara somehow became calmer. What none of her co-workers knew was why. Before she wore blue civilian scrubs, she had worn body armor. Before Georgetown, there had been classified military installations. Before ordinary trauma patients, there had been battlefields. For 8 years, Clara served as a surgical specialist attached to Joint Special Operations Command. She had worked inside mobile operating tents, underground facilities, and conflict zones most Americans would never hear about. 3 years earlier, she had left that world behind and buried her classified past beneath a civilian nursing license. At least, she thought she had. The quiet of the trauma ward shattered at exactly 2:17 a.m. There was no radio warning from dispatch, no ambulance notification, no incoming trauma alert. Instead, the automatic doors of the ambulance bay suddenly flew open. 3 matte black SUVs screeched onto the rain-soaked concrete. Before the vehicles had fully stopped, their doors burst open. 6 men wearing unmarked tactical gear rushed out. "We need a gurney now," one of them shouted. The urgency in his voice instantly cut through the night. Clara reacted without hesitation. "Trauma gurney," she called. 2 orderlies immediately moved with her as they pushed a stretcher toward the entrance. The tactical team opened the rear doors of the center SUV. A body emerged. The patient was a large, powerfully built man in his late 30s. His tactical uniform was shredded and soaked with blood. A lot of blood. "Code Trauma Bay 1. Clara shouted as they transferred him onto the gurney. She grabbed trauma shears and began cutting away layers of damaged gear while the team sprinted down the hallway. "Mechanism of injury," she demanded. The team leader, a towering man with a fresh cut running down his cheek, kept pace beside her. "Classified." Clara shot him a cold look. "I can't treat him if I don't know what happened. Just keep him alive." They burst through the doors of Trauma Bay 1. Doctors and nurses immediately surrounded the patient. As Clara exposed the wound, her stomach tightened. The injury was catastrophic. A massive laceration stretched beneath the sternum and deep into the chest cavity. But something felt wrong. This wasn't normal trauma. Then Dr. Richard Bancroft arrived. The chief of cardiothoracic surgery swept into the room with the confidence of a king entering his throne room. Brilliant, respected, arrogant. Bancroft took one look at the patient and instantly seized control. "Stand back, Jenkins," he ordered. He snapped on gloves. 2 large-bore IVs. Cross-match 6 units of O-negative. "Prepare the operating room immediately." The staff moved. Clara didn't. Something had caught her attention. She leaned closer to the wound. Her nostrils flared. There was a smell. Sharp. Chemical. Wrong. Burnt ozone mixed with sulfur. The hairs on the back of her neck rose. She examined the damaged tissue more carefully. The wound edges weren't simply necrotic. They carried a faint gray-blue discoloration. Tiny bubbles formed and collapsed across the exposed tissue. Microscopic reactions. Active reactions. Her pulse accelerated. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Yemen, 7 years earlier. A classified extraction mission gone catastrophically wrong. A wounded operator. The same smell. The same discoloration. The same chemical reaction. Clara felt ice flood her veins. She knew exactly what she was looking at. A specialized submunitions weapon. Experimental. Rare. Designed with a reactive binary chemical compound that became violently unstable when exposed to intense heat. The realization hit her like a punch. If the operating team used standard electrocautery tools during surgery, the patient's chest could ignite. Dr. Bancroft. Her voice was calm but urgent. The surgeon barely looked up. What? Do not prep him for standard surgery. That got his attention. He frowned. What are you talking about? Clara pointed directly at the wound. This isn't ordinary shrapnel damage. There's a chemical accelerant embedded in the tissue. If electrocautery is used in the operating room, it could trigger a secondary reaction. The room went silent. Several nurses exchanged nervous glances. Bancroft stared at her for a moment. Then he laughed. A short, dismissive laugh. Jenkins, he said, shaking his head. Are you a toxicologist now? He turned back toward the patient. This is severe thoracic trauma with tissue necrosis. Nothing more. Clara didn't move, because she knew something everyone else in that room didn't. And if Dr. Bancroft ignored her warning, the operating room was about to become a bomb. I need to get in there, clamp the bleeders, and cauterize the vessels before he bleeds out on my table. Dr. Richard Bancroft's voice echoed across trauma Bay 1 as nurses and surgical technicians rushed around him. It is not an infection, Clara Jenkins insisted. Breaking every protocol she had spent years following, she stepped directly into Bancroft's personal space. Look at the localized cyanosis around the dermal tissue, she said urgently. Smell the ozone. If you take a bovie to that wound, the chemical residue will ignite. You'll trigger a thermal reaction. Bancroft stared at her for a second before his face flushed crimson. Security, he shouted. The entire trauma bay froze. This nurse has lost her mind. Get her out of my department. The tactical operators, standing along the wall, exchanged uneasy glances. None of them moved. They were soldiers, not physicians. They had brought their wounded teammate to one of the finest hospitals in the nation and placed their trust in the chief surgeon. Now they could only watch. Doctor, listen to me, Clara pleaded, lowering her voice. You do not understand what you're dealing with. I understand perfectly, Bancroft snapped. His eyes narrowed with contempt. You're a nurse, Jenkins. Your job is to hand me instruments and follow instructions. He pointed toward the surgical wing. Prep operating room for immediately. Then he looked directly at Clara. And stay out of my way. Two hospital security officers approached from behind. One placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Come on, Clara, he said quietly. Let it go. Clara clenched her jaw. She wanted to fight. Every instinct screamed at her to stop what was happening. Instead, she was forced backward while the surgical team disconnected monitors, secured 4 lines, and unlocked the trauma gurney. The patient was wheeled toward the operating suite. Helplessly, Clara watched them disappear down the corridor. At the entrance to the surgical wing, Bancroft stopped and turned toward head nurse Brenda Collins. I want Jenkins locked out of this floor. His voice was cold. She is not to scrub in. She is not to observe. She is not to enter operating room 4 under any circumstances. He pointed at Clara. Tell her to sit in the lobby until her shift ends. Then write her up for insubordination. A moment later, the heavy steel doors of OR slid shut. The red INUS light illuminated above the entrance. Clara stood motionless in the hallway. The metallic smell of blood still lingered on her scrubs. For the next 20 minutes, she paced the surgical waiting area. Every second felt unbearable. The tactical team had established a quiet perimeter at the far end of the corridor. Their expressions remained disciplined, but Clara could see the tension beneath the surface. They were worried, terrified even. Clara dropped into a plastic chair and glanced at the large analog clock mounted on the wall. 21 minutes. She knew exactly what was happening inside that operating room. Bancroft would already have opened the chest cavity. He would be searching for the damaged vessels. The moment he located them, he would reach for the Bovie electrocautery device. He always did. The surgeon trusted technology, trusted his experience, trusted himself. The problem was that experience had never exposed him to what was inside that man's chest. The moment electrical current touches the compound, Clara swallowed hard. The patient's chest cavity will flash. Not an explosion. Something worse. A concentrated thermal event. Hot enough to instantly destroy the heart, lungs, and surrounding tissue. The patient would die before anyone understood what had happened. Unable to sit still any longer, Clara stood and walked toward the tactical team leader. "You need to stop that surgery." The operator looked down at her. His face revealed nothing. "Ma'am, please sit down. The surgeon is about to kill your man." The words landed like a hammer. The operator's eyes hardened. Clara stepped closer. "That wound isn't conventional trauma. It's a kilo 7 chemical exposure." For the first time, his expression shifted. Only slightly. But Clara noticed. "I know your unit operates in places that officially don't exist," she continued. "If a civilian surgeon treats a kilo 7 wound like a gunshot injury, your friend isn't leaving this hospital alive." Silence. The operator stared at her. A fraction of a second passed. Then another. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Kilo 7. The designation was classified at the highest levels of the Department of Defense. No civilian nurse should have known it. No civilian nurse should even have heard the term. Slowly, he reached for the encrypted radio clipped to his shoulder. His thumb hovered over the transmit button. Before he could speak, something strange happened. The background noise of the hospital vanished. The soft music, playing through the waiting room speakers, abruptly cut off. The public address system emitted a sharp burst of static. Then silence. Absolute silence. At the far end of the hallway, the main elevator bank locked into override mode. The digital indicators above all 4 elevators flashed simultaneously. Ground floor. Then they began climbing. Second floor. Third floor. Fourth floor. The surgical level. A sharp electronic chime echoed through the corridor. Ding. All 4 elevator doors opened at exactly the same moment. Military police in immaculate dress uniforms stepped out first. Dozens of them. Their polished boots struck the linoleum with synchronized precision. Within seconds, they spread through the hallway, forming a secure corridor. And then everyone in the waiting area realized something extraordinary was happening, because whoever was coming next outranked everyone in the building. Behind them came Dr. Eris Fletcher, the hospital's chief of medicine, pale and sweating, struggling to keep pace with the 2 men leading the formation. Behind him was Lieutenant General Arthur Hayes of the United States Army. The other was General David Whitmore, a 4-star commander from the Pentagon, who oversaw the nation's most deeply buried black operations divisions. "General, please," Dr. Fletcher stammered, half jogging to keep up with Whitmore's stride. "You cannot storm into a sterile surgical wing with armed personnel. This is a severe violation of hospital protocol and federal health regulations." General Whitmore did not look at him. His eyes stayed fixed forward. "Dr. Fletcher, as of now your hospital has been federalized under the National Security Act. If you speak to me again, I will have you detained for obstructing a military operation." Fletcher stopped dead, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The tactical operative at the hallway snapped to attention and saluted the generals. Whitmore gave a curt nod and moved toward the reinforced glass of operating room 4. Inside, the surgical team was in motion. Through the window, Whitmore saw Dr. Bancroft hunched over the patient, hands deep in the chest cavity. A nurse passed him the electrocautery device. Whitmore slammed his palm onto the intercom. "This is General David Whitmore. Step away from the table immediately." Bancroft's head snapped up. Rage flashed across his face. "Who the hell do you think you are? I am in the middle of a life-saving procedure. Security, remove these people from my OR." Whitmore's voice cut through the speakers, cold and absolute. "If you activate that instrument, you will ignite a binary compound embedded in the tissue. You will kill the patient." Bancroft froze. His gaze dropped to the device in his hand, then to the unnatural bluish-gray wound in the patient's chest. For the first time, doubt cracked his authority. Slowly, he lowered the instrument and stepped back, hands raised. Whitmore turned from the glass. The hallway beyond had gone silent, every voice swallowed by tension. He scanned the assembled staff, MPs, and stunned administrators. I was told a trauma nurse attempted to stop this procedure, he said. A nurse who correctly identified the compound. Dr. Fletcher, shaking, pointed toward the waiting area. She was suspended. Nurse Jenkins, for insubordination. Whitmore's gaze followed the direction. Clara Jenkins stood near the wall, blood on her scrubs, expression unreadable. The general walked past security, past doctors, past armed escorts, until he stood directly before her. The entire corridor held its breath. Then, to everyone's shock, he snapped a crisp salute. "Captain Jenkins," Whitmore said quietly, "your resignation from JSOC is suspended. We need you back. You are the only one who can disarm what is inside him." Silence fell so heavily it felt physical. Fletcher's face drained of color. Security officers stepped back instinctively, suddenly unsure who they were even protecting. The air in the corridor felt compressed, as if the building itself had begun to listen. Clara Jenkins did not move at first. Her eyes locked onto Whitmore, searching for hesitation that was not there. The weight of memory surged through her, the kind of classified missions she had buried years ago in silence and steel. She exhaled slowly, the way she used to before entering hostile triage zones. Whitmore stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We don't have time to debate protocol, Captain. That compound is already destabilizing. If Bancroft resumes cautery, we lose him and possibly the entire OR team. You are the only operator who has seen this before." Clara finally nodded once, sharply. "Then get me back in that room." Without waiting for approval, Clara turned toward the sealed doors of Operating Room 4. Security instinctively stepped aside, recognizing something in her posture that no longer resembled a suspended nurse, but a returning field asset. Fletcher whispered helplessly that they were violating every protocol in the hospital charter, but no one listened. Inside the OR, alarms began to escalate again, signaling renewed instability in the patient's condition. Clara placed her hand on the door panel, preparing to enter, knowing that whatever happened next would decide whether the man inside lived or died. Clara Jenkins did not flinch. There was no smile, no trace of indication, no reaction at all that belonged to the civilian nurse anyone in that hospital thought they knew. Instead, something inside her posture shifted. The slight fatigue that had lived in her shoulders for years vanished in an instant. In its place stood something else entirely. Rigid, controlled, operational. General Whitmore studied her for half a second, then lowered a salute. "General Whitmore," Clara said, her voice stripped of the soft clinical cadence she used with hospital staff. "I am currently listed as a civilian. I do not have surgical privileges in this hospital." Whitmore reached inside his coat. "As of this moment," he said, "this facility is under direct jurisdiction of the Department of Defense." He pressed a silver-embossed identification badge into her palm. "You have full operational and medical authority. What do you need?" Claire didn't even look at the badge. "I need Dr. Bancroft removed from Operating Room 4 before his ego detonates a thermal binary compound inside that patient." Her eyes flicked toward the sealed glass of OR4. "I need an ice bath. 5 liters of chilled sodium bicarbonate and sterile distilled water. A purely mechanical excision kit. No electricity. No cautery. No ultrasonic tools. If it uses current to cut or seal, it does not enter that room." A pause. "And I need 2 units of O-negative blood transfusing immediately." Whitmore turned sharply toward Lieutenant General Hayes. "You heard the captain. Make it happen." Hayes barked an order without hesitation. Military police moved instantly, pushing through sterile boundaries and into the surgical wing. Inside OR4, chaos had been carefully contained until that moment. Dr. Richard Bancroft still stood over the patient, hands raised in forced surrender, confusion, and rage twisting behind his mask. Monitors screamed in uneven rhythm. Blood-soaked gauze sheets and pooled beneath the operating table. The MPs entered like a breached team entering hostile territory. "This is a sterile field," Bancroft shouted. "You are contaminating my operating room." One officer stepped forward, hand resting near his holster. "Step away from the table, doctor. I am the chief cardiothoracic surgeon." Bancroft snapped. If I don't clamp the descending aorta now, he dies in minutes. No one is dying in here except because of you. Clara's voice cut through the room. The doors opened again. She walked in. No hesitation. No scrub and delay. No sterile ceremony. She snapped on fresh gloves as she moved, eyes already locked onto the surgical field. Bancroft turned toward her in disbelief. Jenkins, what are you doing, Mayor? Security. Remove her immediately. You're relieved. General Whitmore's voice thundered from the doorway. The room went still. Escort him out. The MPs grabbed Bancroft by both arms. What are you doing? He shouted, struggling. You're committing malpractice. You're killing this man. He kicked over a tray of surgical clamps. Metal exploded across the tile floor in a chaotic scatter. But he was already being dragged backward. The doors hissed shut behind him. Silence returned, but it was a heavier kind than before. Clara stepped into position opposite the operating table. The anesthesiologist, a young resident named Dr. David Harlan, stood frozen, hands hovering over the controls. The monitors beeped too fast, too shallow. Heart rate unstable. Blood pressure collapsing. Oxygen saturation falling. He's bleeding out because you cut through necrotic fascia without accounting for the chemical instability, Clara said quietly. She didn't look at anyone when she spoke. Only the patient. David swallowed. I don't know what you want me to do. Push 1 milligram of epinephrine, Clara said sharply. Now. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then complied. Pushing. The line delivered the medication. The monitor responded with a brief spike, then wavered again, like a failing heartbeat refusing to stabilize. The smell in the room was changing. Ozone. Sulfur. Something metallic underneath it. It was getting stronger. Clara leaned over the chest wound. The tissue was no longer simply damaged. It was reacting. The edges of the incision had deepened into a violent purple-black hue, spreading outward in branching patterns. Tiny bubbles formed in the exposed tissue and collapsed almost instantly, as if the flesh itself was exhaling heat. Kylo 7. She finally confirmed it in her mind. A classified reactive compound designed to remain dormant until exposed to oxygen and thermal fluctuation. And now it was waking up. He's destabilizing, David whispered. I know, Clara said. Her eyes sharpened. Keep him sedated. Do not increase airflow. No unnecessary exposure. And nobody touches that cautery unit. She reached for a mechanical clamp tray that had just been wheeled in. No power cords. No electronics. Just steel. Then she froze for the first time. Not from fear. From recognition. She leaned closer, peering past the blood, past the torn tissue, past the swelling chemical burn at the core of the wound. Her expression changed. Subtle, controlled, dangerous, because she knew him. Not just medically, personally. Major Thomas Rear, she said under her breath. The anesthesiologist blinked. What? Clara didn't answer immediately. Her mind was already years away. Dust-choked air in Kandahar, a collapsing triage tent, a man with no identity bleeding out on a metal table while artillery shook the ground. A ghost, an asset that officially did not exist. And yet here he was, on a surgical table in Washington, D.C., bleeding from a wound that should not exist in civilian space. If he's here, Clara said finally, voice lower now, then something has gone very wrong outside this hospital. The chemical scent thickened again. The monitors spiked. The Kylo 7 reaction was accelerating. Clara tightened her grip on the steel clamp. Then we don't have time to think, she said. We only have time to cut carefully. Pushing AP, the anesthesiologist stammered, hands trembling as he injected the syringe into Major Rear's line. A military medic rushed in seconds later, carrying a stainless steel bucket packed with crushed ice and sealed bags of cold sodium bicarbonate. Pour the bicarb directly over the ice, Clara ordered immediately. Then I need a heavy gauge irrigation syringe. Now. No one questioned her tone. No one hesitated. The medic dumped the packets into the bucket, the chemical mixture hissing faintly as it began to chill further. Another officer shoved a large irrigation syringe into Clara's hand. She turned back to the open chest. The wound was worse than before. Edges of tissue pulsed with a faint violet-black sheen, and the air above it shimmered with heat distortion. The smell, ozone and sulfur, had become sharp enough to sting the back of the throat. Clara grabbed the oldest tool in the tray, a heavy steel scalpel. No electronics, no cautery, no risk. Kilo. 7 compounds were designed for exactly this scenario. Anti-tamper bioreactives. If an operator attempted removal with heat or friction, the embedded payload would trigger a localized thermal flash, erasing both tissue and forensic evidence. General Whitmore's voice cut through the intercom. You have a limited window. If that compound reaches critical mass, we evacuate the wing. Claire didn't look up. I am not losing this asset, she said flatly. Hold your perimeter. She plunged the irrigation syringe into the slushy mixture and drew back a full dose of freezing alkaline solution. Heart rate 160, the anesthesiologist said, voice breaking. Blood pressure 60/40. He's crashing. Keep him under, Clara replied. I am keeping him under. He's not responding. Then keep trying. Clara leaned over the open cavity. Heat radiated from the wound like a living thing. Even through double gloves, she felt it. The tissue was actively reacting now, bubbling and slow, violent pulses near the descending aorta. Without hesitation, she injected the icy sodium bicarbonate directly into the chest. A sharp hiss erupted. The wound vented a burst of white vapor, thick and acrid, filling the surgical field with a choking chemical fog. The anesthesiologist recoiled, coughing into his sleeve. Clara didn't blink. The reaction slowed. Not stopped, just delayed. More ice, she ordered. Keep flooding the field every minute. The medic scrambled to comply, tipping fresh slush into her hands. Clara picked up the scalpel again. Now she moved. Fast, controlled. Surgical precision sharpened into something closer to instinct. She cut away the outer ring of contaminated tissue, working in thin, deliberate margins. Each excised fragment was immediately lifted by the medic and dropped into a sealed biohazard container. No wasted movement, no second guessing. But the monitors were still screaming. Pressure dropping 50/30. David called out. He's bleeding from a pulmonary branch. Bancroft tore it when he cleared the fascia. Claire didn't look up. I know where it is. She dropped the scalpel. For a split second, the room froze. Then Clara leaned into the cavity and plunged both gloved hands inside. No visibility, only heat, motion, and blood. The heart was there, fighting, erratic, desperate. She closed her eyes. The world narrowed to sensation. Warm arterial flow, muscle tension, the rhythmic, failing contractions of a body trying not to die. Her fingers traced along the aortic arch, sliding downward through the slick, ice-chilled field until she felt it. A jet of arterial blood. Sharp, pulsing. Wrong. There, she muttered. She pressed her fingers over the tear. Instantly, the bleeding slowed. I've got it, she said. Hand me 4-0 proline. Needle driver. No power tools. David stared at her like she was insane. You can't suture blind in an ice bath. You'll tear the myocardium. Watch me, Clara replied. Needle driver in hand, she anchored the vessel with her left fingers while guiding the curved needle with her right. She worked entirely by touch. No visualization, no hesitation. The first pass, then the second, then a tightening knot. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, as if her hands remembered things her conscious mind had long buried. Flush the field, she ordered. The medic dumped the remaining slush into the cavity. The temperature dropped again. The reaction slowed further. Clara released pressure on the artery. Just slightly. The monitor beep, still erratic, shifted. A moment passed. Then another. Pressure, David whispered, eyes locked on the screen. It's rising. 70/40. 90/60. Heart rate dropping. 140. 120. 110. He's stabilizing, he said, voice barely audible. For the first time since the procedure began, the chaos in the room softened. Clara exhaled slowly, still holding position over the open chest. But her expression didn't relax, because stabilization wasn't victory. It was just a moment before the next reaction. The angry violet-black discoloration crossed the surgical field, faded in real time. Clara Jenkins stood over the open chest cavity, motionless for a beat, watching as the last traces of the Kilo 7 reaction collapsed into inert tissue. The ozone stench that had filled or for moments earlier was gone, replaced by the sterile, metallic smell of blood and antiseptic. Healthy red tissue returned to view. No bubbling, no thermal shimmer, no instability. The compound is neutralized, Clara said at last, stepping back from the table. Her gloves were still dripping. Her scrubs were soaked dark at the front, but her voice was steady, clinical again, detached in the way only someone who had survived too many high-stakes rooms could sound. She looked up through the reinforced glass. General Whitmore was still there watching. For the first time since the operation began, something in his expression softened, just slightly. Relief. "Incredible work, Captain." His voice came through the intercom. "Secure the patient for immediate transfer. We are moving him to a Department of Defense medical facility." The doors to OR opened again. This time, it wasn't chaos, it was precision. A team of military field surgeons entered with hardened transport gurneys, portable life support systems, and reinforced medical cases. They moved like a unit designed for extraction rather than treatment. Within seconds, they took over the field, stabilizing lines, transferring monitors, sealing the surgical site with temporary sterile packing. Major Rear's chest was carefully closed into controlled emergency containment. Clara stepped away. No hesitation. No lingering authority struggle. Her role in this phase was complete. She stripped off her surgical gown and gloves, dropping them into the biohazard bin without ceremony. Then she walked out of the operating room without looking back at the patient, the surgeons, or the machines that now surrounded him. The hallway outside had transformed. Civilian staff had been pushed into a guarded cluster at the far end of the wing. Armed military police stood between them and the surgical suite, silent and immovable. Dr. Bancroft was there too, leaning against the wall, pale, sweaty, hollowed out. The arrogance that once defined him was gone, replaced by something quieter and far less comfortable. Shock. He looked at Clara as she passed, but he couldn't hold her gaze. He looked away first. General Whitmore stepped into her path before she reached the exit. No entourage now. No escorts. Just him. The noise of the hospital seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them in the fluorescent hum of the corridor. "You saved multiple lives today, Captain Jenkins," Whitmore said quietly. Clara didn't respond immediately. Rear had a microdrive embedded near his descending aorta. Whitmore continued. Kilo 7 was designed to destroy it if extraction was compromised. If Bancroft had activated electrocautery, we would have lost every name on that drive, every deep cover operative in Eastern Europe. Clara's expression didn't change. "You shouldn't have brought him into a civilian hospital," she said flatly. "He almost died because your extraction team panicked." "They brought him here because they knew you worked here," Whitmore replied. "They didn't trust agency surgeons. They trusted you." That landed differently, not as praise, as burden. Clara looked past him toward the elevator bank where the military team was already moving Major Rear into secure transport. Machines beeped in rhythm as they disappeared behind closing doors. Whitmore reached into his coat. "This is no longer a request," he said. He placed a heavy black titanium coin into her hand. The insignia of Joint Special Operations Command was etched into its surface, worn, unmistakable, permanent. "Your resignation is officially voided," Whitmore said. "The country still needs you. The civilian life never suited you anyway." He paused. "You're too good in the dark." He didn't wait for an answer. Whitmore turned and walked away, his escorts falling into formation as if the conversation had already been concluded long before it started. Within moments, the military presence dissolved from the corridor as quickly as it had arrived. Silence returned. Heavy, artificial. Dr. Eris Fletcher approached cautiously, adjusting his tie as if that could restore order to what he had just witnessed. "Nurse Jenkins," he began carefully. "We need to discuss your conduct, your employment status." "I quit," Clara said. 2 words. Clean. Final. She didn't even slow down. Fletcher stopped speaking. Clara walked through the staff corridor, past stunned nurses, past frozen security guards, past the aftermath of a system that had briefly lost control of itself. In the locker room, she changed without urgency. Bloodstained scrubs came off. Civilian clothes went on, dark jeans, a heavy wool coat, boots still scuffed from a life she had tried to bury. When she stepped outside Georgetown University Hospital, the rain hit her instantly, cold, heavy, relentless. She paused at the top of the steps. In her hand, the titanium coin caught the city lights even under the storm. For a moment, she just stood there, letting the water run down her face. The predictable life she had built was gone, not shattered, reclaimed. She closed her fingers around the coin. Then she stepped forward into the rain and disappeared into the night.